Nia Washington pressed her hand against her stomach as another sharp pain shot through her body. The parking lot of St. Mary's Emergency Hospital stretched before her, bright fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the wet pavement. Blood stained her bright red dress, the one she had worn to work that morning when everything still seemed normal. Now, sitting in her beat-up Honda Civic at 11 p.m., nothing felt normal anymore. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her phone. The pain was getting worse. At 4 months pregnant, she knew this wasn't right. This wasn't supposed to happen. The cramping, the bleeding, the fear that gripped her chest like a vice. She needed to text her best friend Kendra. Kendra would know what to do. Kendra always knew what to do. Her vision blurred as she typed frantically into her phone. Emergency. At hospital. Bleeding bad. Might lose the baby. So scared. Jerome already left me. Can't do this alone. Please come. She hit send and leaned back against the driver's seat, breathing hard. Another wave of pain made her double over. She needed to get inside. She needed help. But she also needed someone to be there for her, someone who cared. The phone buzzed almost immediately. On my way. Which hospital? Stay calm. Relief flooded through her. At least Kendra was coming. At least she wouldn't face this alone. She typed back quickly. St. Mary's Emergency. Hurry please. 5 minutes. Hold on. Nia pushed open her car door and stumbled toward the hospital entrance. The automatic doors slid open, and the bright white lights of the emergency room made her squint. The smell of disinfectant hit her nose as she approached the reception desk. A tired-looking nurse looked up. How can I help you? I'm pregnant, Nia said, her voice barely a whisper. I'm bleeding. Something's wrong. The nurse's expression changed immediately. How far along are you? 4 months. Okay, honey, we're going to take good care of you. Let's get you checked in. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of forms, medical questions, and being moved to a small examination room. The doctor, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Johnson, explained they needed to run tests immediately. Is someone coming to be with you? Dr. Johnson asked as she prepared the ultrasound machine. Yes, my friend should be here any minute. But as the minutes ticked by, Kendra didn't appear. Nia's phone remained silent. Where was she? She had said 5 minutes and it had been almost 30. The ultrasound screen flickered to life, and Dr. Johnson moved the wand across Nia's belly. The black and white images meant nothing to Nia, but she watched the doctor's face carefully for any sign of what they revealed. Good news, Dr. Johnson said finally. The baby looks fine. Strong heartbeat. But you are having some bleeding that we need to monitor closely. I want to keep you overnight for observation. Relief washed over Nia so powerfully that tears started flowing down her cheeks. The baby was okay. Her baby was okay. But where was Kendra? She picked up her phone again and scrolled through her messages. That's when she saw it. The name at the top of their text conversation. Her blood went cold. Christopher Bennett. Not Kendra Williams. Christopher Bennett. Her boss. The CEO of Bennett Industries. The billionaire who signed her paychecks and barely knew she existed beyond her role in the accounting department. She had texted her boss about her pregnancy emergency. Her secret pregnancy that no one at work knew about. She had told him about Jerome leaving her, about being alone and scared, about potentially losing her baby. This was a disaster. Her phone buzzed with another message. Are you okay? I'm in the parking lot but I don't see you. Nia stared at the message in horror. He was here. Christopher Bennett was actually here at the hospital looking for her. He had dropped everything and driven to St. Mary's Hospital at 11 p.m. because of her desperate text message. She had to fix this. She had to explain. She had to apologize for bothering him and tell him it was all a mistake. But as she started typing a response, another wave of pain hit her. Dr. Johnson returned with a nurse. We're moving you upstairs to a room, the doctor said. You need complete bed rest and we want to monitor you closely. This bleeding could indicate several different conditions and we need to be careful. But I need to. Nia started to protest, thinking of Christopher waiting outside. You need to rest, Dr. Johnson said firmly. Whatever it is can wait. Your baby's health comes first. As they wheeled her toward the elevator, Nia clutched her phone. Through the wide windows of the emergency room she could see the parking lot. And there, standing beside a sleek black car that probably cost more than she made in 2 years, was a tall figure in a navy blue suit. Christopher Bennett had actually come. Her boss, the man who probably didn't even know her last name, had received her desperate message and driven through the night to help her. The elevator doors closed, but the image of him standing there, looking concerned and determined, stayed with her. What had she done? Christopher Bennett stood in the hospital parking lot, checking his phone for the third time. The message had come through just as he was leaving his downtown office after another late night of quarterly reviews. At first, he thought it was meant for someone else. Then he realized it was from a number in his contacts, though he couldn't immediately place who it belonged to. Someone was in trouble. Someone was scared and alone, facing the possibility of losing their baby. The raw fear in those text messages had hit him like a punch to the chest. He had left immediately. Now, standing outside St. Mary's Emergency Hospital, he felt slightly foolish. What if it really had been a wrong number? What if he was interfering in something that wasn't his business? But the messages had been so desperate, so filled with genuine terror. He couldn't just ignore them. His phone buzzed. Room 314. They moved me upstairs. I need to explain. Room 314. So the person was definitely here and they were being treated. That was good. He pocketed his phone and headed toward the hospital entrance. The elevator ride to the third floor gave him time to think. He was a successful businessman, used to solving problems and taking charge of difficult situations. But this felt different. This felt personal in a way that made him uncomfortable. He found room 314 and knocked gently on the door frame. The room was dimly lit, with one bed occupied by a young woman with dark skin and worried eyes. She wore a hospital gown now, but he could see a bright red dress hanging in the small closet. It took him a moment to recognize her. Nia? He said, stepping into the room. Nia Washington from accounting? She nodded, looking mortified. Mr. Bennett, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to text you. I thought I was texting my friend. I was scared and typing fast and I must have picked the wrong contact and… Stop, he said gently, moving closer to her bed. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? The kindness in his voice seemed to surprise her. She had expected anger, maybe disappointment that an employee had bothered him with personal problems. Instead, he looked genuinely concerned. The baby is okay, she said quietly. The doctor says I need to stay overnight for observation. But Mr. Bennett, you really don't need to be here. I can handle this myself. Christopher pulled the visitor chair closer to her bed and sat down. First, call me Christopher. Second, you texted asking for help. I'm here to help. But this isn't your problem. You work for me, he said simply. That makes you part of my responsibility. Besides, you said you were alone. No one should have to face something like this alone. Nia studied his face, looking for signs of pity or obligation. Instead, she found genuine warmth. She had worked at Bennett Industries for 2 years, but had never really interacted with Christopher beyond polite greetings in the hallway. She knew he was successful, wealthy, and had a reputation for being fair but distant with employees. This was not distant. This was someone who had dropped everything to help a stranger. I don't understand, she said. Why would you come here? You don't even know me. I know you work hard, Christopher said. I know you're always the first one in the office and the last one to leave. I know you helped train 3 new employees last year without being asked. I notice more than you think. A nurse entered the room carrying a water pitcher and some crackers. How are we feeling, honey? Better, Nia said. The pain has stopped. Good. Dr. Johnson will be by in the morning to check on you again. Try to get some sleep. The nurse glanced at Christopher. Visiting hours end at midnight, but family can stay if needed. After she left, an awkward silence filled the room. I should go, Christopher said, starting to stand. Wait. Nia's voice was soft. I need to tell you something. About the father. Christopher sat back down, waiting patiently. His name is Jerome. Jerome Martinez. We were together for 8 months. When I told him about the baby, she took a deep breath. He said he wasn't ready to be a father. He said he was too young for that kind of responsibility. He moved out the next day. I'm sorry, Christopher said, and he meant it. I've been trying to handle everything myself. The doctor visits, the expenses, preparing for the baby. I work full-time, but it's still not enough. When the bleeding started tonight, I just felt so alone and scared. Christopher was quiet for a long moment. How far along are you? 4 months. It's a girl. Nia's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. I found out last week. Do you have family nearby? My mom lives about an hour away. She's been supportive, but she works 2 jobs and can't always be available. My dad died when I was 15. Christopher processed this information. A single mother, working full-time, trying to handle a pregnancy alone while dealing with medical complications. It painted a picture of someone trying very hard to stay strong while everything around her felt uncertain. What can I do to help? He asked. Nia looked at him in surprise. You don't need to. What can I do to help? He repeated more firmly. She was quiet for several minutes, clearly wrestling with accepting help from her boss. Finally she said, the medical bills are going to be expensive. My insurance covers some of it but not everything. And if I need bed rest, I might have to take unpaid leave from work. Done, Christopher said immediately. Medical bills covered and you'll receive full pay for any leave you need. I can't accept that, Nia protested. It's too much. You can and you will, Christopher said gently but firmly. This is what we do for people we care about. We help them. Tears started flowing down Nia's cheeks again, but this time they were tears of relief rather than fear. Why are you being so kind to me? She whispered. Christopher was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. The truth was he wasn't entirely sure himself. Something about her situation, about her quiet strength and determination, had touched something in him that he usually kept carefully guarded. Because everyone deserves to have someone in their corner, he said finally. And right now I'm in yours. The simple honesty of his words filled the room with a warmth that had nothing to do with the hospital heating system. For the first time in months, Nia felt like she might not have to face everything alone. Outside, the city lights twinkled through the hospital window, and for both of them, something had shifted in a way neither fully understood yet. The morning sun streamed through the hospital window as Dr. Johnson entered Nia's room, clipboard in hand. Christopher had stayed the entire night, dozing fitfully in the uncomfortable visitor chair. Nia had slept better than she had in weeks, feeling safe for the first time since Jerome left. Good morning, Dr. Johnson said warmly. How are we feeling today? Much better, Nia replied honestly. The cramping had stopped completely, and the bleeding had reduced to almost nothing. Dr. Johnson began her examination, checking Nia's vital signs and listening to the baby's heartbeat with a small device. The steady whooshing sound filled the room, strong and reassuring. Excellent, the doctor said with a smile. Baby sounds perfect. Your blood pressure is back to normal, and all your tests from last night came back clear. Christopher sat forward in his chair. So everything is okay? The immediate crisis has passed, Dr. Johnson explained. But Nia, I need you to understand that you're at risk for something called placental abruption. It's not common, but it can be serious. You need to take things very easy for the next few weeks. What does that mean exactly? Nia asked. Bed rest for at least 2 weeks. No lifting anything over 10 pounds. No standing for long periods. Minimal stress. Dr. Johnson looked seriously at both of them. This is crucial for both your health and the baby's health. Christopher spoke up immediately. She'll have whatever support she needs. Dr. Johnson nodded approvingly. Good. Family support is essential in situations like this. She turned back to Nia. I'll write you a prescription for some vitamins that will help, and I want to see you again in 1 week. Any bleeding, cramping, or unusual symptoms, you come back immediately. After the doctor left, Christopher pulled his chair closer to Nia's bed. We need to talk about the practical details. Christopher, I still can't believe you're doing this. We've been through this, he said with a gentle smile. Now let's figure out what you need. Nia took a deep breath. She had spent so many months trying to handle everything alone that accepting help felt foreign and overwhelming. But looking at Christopher's determined expression, she realized he wasn't going to take no for an answer. My apartment is on the 3rd floor, she said slowly. No elevator. If I'm supposed to be on bed rest. You'll need somewhere else to stay, Christopher finished. Do you have somewhere you can go? My mom's house, but she lives an hour away from the hospital. If something happens. Christopher was quiet for a moment, thinking. I have a solution, but I want you to hear me out before you say no. Nia looked at him warily. Okay. I own a small apartment building downtown about 10 minutes from here. There's a vacant unit on the ground floor. It's furnished, has everything you need. You could stay there during your recovery. I can't afford. No rent, Christopher said quickly. Consider it a company benefit. Temporary housing assistance. Nia stared at him. That's not a real company benefit. It is now, Christopher said with a slight smile. I own the company. I can make new benefits. Despite everything, Nia found herself smiling back. You're serious, aren't you? Dead serious. You need a safe place to recover that's close to medical care. I have a safe place close to medical care. It's logical. A knock on the door interrupted them. A woman in her 50s with dark skin and worried eyes peeked in. Nia, baby, are you okay? The woman rushed to the bed and hugged Nia carefully. Mom, I'm fine. The baby's fine. This is my boss, Christopher Bennett. Christopher, this is my mother, Martha Washington. Christopher stood and extended his hand. Mrs. Washington, it's nice to meet you. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. Martha shook his hand while studying his face carefully. You're the one who's been here all night? Yes, ma'am. And you're the one offering to help my daughter? I am. Martha Washington was not easily impressed by expensive suits or polite manners. She had raised Nia as a single mother after her husband died, working 2 jobs to keep food on the table. She could spot insincerity from a mile away. But looking at Christopher Bennett, she saw something genuine in his eyes when he looked at her daughter. Why? She asked bluntly. Christopher considered the question carefully. Because she needed help and I was in a position to provide it. That's not a complete answer, Martha said. Christopher looked at Nia, then back at her mother. You're right. The complete answer is that your daughter is one of the hardest workers I've ever employed. She's kind, responsible, and facing a difficult situation that no one should have to face alone. I have resources that can make her life easier during a challenging time. It seems like the right thing to do. Martha nodded slowly. And what do you expect in return? Nothing, Christopher said simply. I expect nothing in return. The room was quiet for a moment as Martha processed this. Finally, she turned to Nia. Baby, what do you think? Nia looked between her mother and Christopher. 6 months ago, her biggest worry had been whether she could afford to upgrade her health insurance. Now she was facing single motherhood, medical complications, and financial stress that kept her awake at night. And here was her boss, a man she barely knew, offering to solve most of her immediate problems without asking for anything in return. I think, she said slowly, that I would be very grateful for his help. Martha smiled for the first time since arriving. Then I think you should accept it with gratitude and grace. Christopher felt something loosen in his chest at Martha's approval. He hadn't realized how much it mattered to him until that moment. There's one more thing, he said. I'd like to cover all of your medical expenses. Prenatal care, delivery, everything. I know insurance doesn't cover everything, and I don't want you worrying about bills when you should be focusing on staying healthy. Nia's eyes filled with tears again. Christopher, that's too much. I can't possibly. You can and you will, Martha said firmly. Baby, when someone offers you a blessing, you don't argue with it. You say thank you and you accept it with a grateful heart. Nia looked at her mother, then at Christopher. Thank you, she said softly. I accept your help and I'm more grateful than I can express. Christopher nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the hospital's heating system. Good, he said. Now let's get you discharged so we can get you settled somewhere comfortable. As the discharge papers were being prepared, Christopher found himself thinking about the apartment building downtown. He hadn't mentioned that he lived in the penthouse of that same building. He told himself it was just practical. Easy to check on her, make sure she had everything she needed. But deep down he knew there was more to it than that. The apartment was nothing like Nia had expected. Christopher's small ground floor unit turned out to be a spacious 2-bedroom with hardwood floors, modern appliances, and windows that let in streams of bright natural light. The furniture was comfortable and elegant without being pretentious, in soft blues and warm greens that made the space feel peaceful. This is beautiful, Nia said as Christopher set her small overnight bag by the door. She was wearing the bright red dress from yesterday, now clean, and she felt oddly formal in the casual space. The kitchen is fully stocked, Christopher said, walking her through the apartment. There's a grocery service that delivers and I've set up an account for you. Just order whatever you need. Nia stopped walking and stared at him. Christopher, you can't keep doing this. Doing what? Taking care of everything. The apartment, the groceries, the medical bills. It's too much. Christopher turned to face her fully. Nia, can I ask you something? Okay. When Jerome left, how did that make you feel? The question caught her off guard. Abandoned. Scared. Like I wasn't worth fighting for. Christopher nodded. I understand that feeling. When I was 12, my father almost lost the family business. We went from having everything to having our house foreclosed on in the span of 6 months. I watched my parents argue about money every night. I watched my mother cry when she thought no one was looking. Nia settled carefully onto the couch, listening. One day my father's business partner, a man named Robert Chin, showed up at our door. He had restructured the debt, saved the business, and bought back our house. He handed my father the deed and said, "Everyone deserves a second chance." What happened? We accepted his help. My father swallowed his pride, accepted every offer of assistance, and spent the next 10 years rebuilding. Not just the business but our family's stability. Christopher sat down across from her. If we had refused Robert's help out of pride, I would have grown up in poverty. My parents' marriage might not have survived. I might never have gotten the education that led to everything I have now. But this is different. Is it? Christopher asked gently. You're facing a challenge that's bigger than what you can handle alone. I have resources that can help. The only difference is that you work for me instead of with me. Nia was quiet for several minutes, processing his words. What if I can't pay you back? There's nothing to pay back. This isn't a loan, Nia. It's help. But why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why would you do all this for someone you barely know? Christopher looked out the window at the city street below. The question had been nagging at him too. He could give her the logical answers. She was a good employee, it was the right thing to do, he had the resources to help. But there was something deeper, something he wasn't ready to examine too closely. Because, he said finally, sometimes life puts people in our path for a reason. Maybe you're supposed to let me help you. Maybe I'm supposed to learn something from helping you. What could you possibly learn from me? Christopher smiled. I don't know yet. But I'd like to find out. The simplicity of his answer somehow made it more powerful. Nia felt the last of her resistance melting away. Okay, she said. I accept your help. All of it. With gratitude. Good. Christopher stood up. Now Dr. Johnson said you need to rest. Is there anything you need right now? Nia looked around the beautiful apartment that was now temporarily hers, thinking about the comfortable bed waiting in the next room, the fully stocked kitchen, the peace of not having to worry about medical bills or rent. Actually, she said, I think I have everything I need. Christopher smiled. I'll check on you tomorrow. Call me if anything comes up. Anything at all. After he left, Nia sat in the quiet apartment for a long time. Through the windows she could see people walking by on the sidewalk below, heading to work or lunch or wherever their Tuesday afternoon was taking them. Normal people with normal problems. 6 months ago she had been one of those people. Now she was pregnant, single, living in an apartment owned by her billionaire boss, and feeling more cared for than she had in years. Her phone buzzed with a text message. For a split second, her heart jumped, thinking it might be Jerome. But the name on the screen was Christopher. Forgot to mention, there's a doctor's appointment scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. Car service will pick you up at 1:30. Rest well. She stared at the message then typed back, thank you. For everything. His response came quickly, you're welcome. Take care of yourself and that baby. Nia placed her hand on her stomach, where her daughter was growing safely. For the first time since she had learned she was pregnant, she felt genuinely optimistic about the future. But as she drifted off for an afternoon nap, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a question she wasn't ready to answer. What happens when this is over? Will Nia's acceptance of help change both their lives forever? What do you think will happen next? Subscribe and comment your predictions below. Christopher, meanwhile, was back in his office trying to focus on quarterly reports. But his mind kept wandering to the woman resting in the apartment below his penthouse. He had solved her immediate problems, but something told him this was just the beginning of their story, not the end. He had told her that sometimes life puts people in our path for a reason. As he looked out his office window toward the building where Nia was now safely resting, he wondered if he was about to discover what that reason might be. 1 week later, Christopher knocked on Nia's apartment door carrying a bag of fresh groceries and what had become his daily question. How are you feeling today? Much better, Nia said, opening the door with a genuine smile. She wore a comfortable blue maternity dress that Christopher had sent over, along with several others in bright colors. Dr. Johnson said yesterday that the baby is doing perfectly. And you? How are you doing? Nia considered the question as she watched Christopher unpack groceries in the kitchen. It had become their routine. He stopped by every day after work, usually bringing something she needed or something he thought she might enjoy. Yesterday it had been books. The day before, a selection of herbal teas that were safe during pregnancy. Honestly, she said, I feel guilty. Christopher paused in unpacking a bag of fresh vegetables. About what? About all of this. She gestured around the beautiful apartment. About not working. About you taking care of everything. I've never not had a job, Christopher. Since I was 16, I've always worked. You are working, Christopher said. You're growing a healthy baby. That's a full-time job. It doesn't feel like work. Christopher finished unpacking the groceries and turned to face her. Can I tell you something about work? Okay. For the first 5 years after college, I worked 80-hour weeks. I ate every meal at my desk. I hadn't taken a vacation day in 3 years. I thought that was what success looked like. What changed? I ended up in the hospital with exhaustion. The doctor told me that if I didn't slow down, I was going to have serious health problems before I turned 30. Christopher sat down at the small dining table. That's when I learned the difference between working hard and working smart. What do you mean? Working hard means doing whatever it takes to get by. Working smart means accepting help when it's offered so you can focus your energy on what really matters. Nia joined him at the table. And what really matters right now? Your health. The baby's health. Making sure you both come through this strong and ready for whatever comes next. They were quiet for a moment, comfortable in each other's company in a way that felt natural now. Over the past week, their daily conversations had evolved from polite check-ins to genuine exchanges about their lives, their hopes, their fears. Can I ask you something personal? Nia said. Of course. Have you ever been married? Had kids? Christopher was quiet for several minutes. I was engaged once. 3 years ago. Her name was Rebecca. What happened? She decided she wanted someone who would put her first instead of putting work first. She wasn't wrong. Do you regret it? Christopher considered the question carefully. I regret that I hurt someone who deserved better. But I don't regret that it ended. We wanted different things from life. What do you want from life? The question hung in the air between them. Christopher found himself looking at Nia's face, noticing the way the afternoon light brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes, the way she unconsciously placed her hand on her growing belly when she was thinking. I used to think I wanted success, he said finally. Money, power, recognition. But lately I think what I really want is to matter to someone. To make a difference in a way that's about more than business. You matter to me, Nia said softly. You've made more difference in my life than I ever imagined possible. The words created a warmth between them that neither had expected. Christopher felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that his feelings for Nia were becoming more complicated than simple concern for an employee. Nia, he started to say, then stopped. What? Nothing. Just, I'm glad you're feeling better. But it wasn't nothing and they both knew it. That evening, after Christopher had left for a business dinner, Nia sat in the comfortable living room thinking about their conversation. The apartment felt too quiet without his presence, which was a dangerous realization. She was developing feelings for him. Real feelings that went beyond gratitude for his help. The way he listened to her when she talked about her fears for the future. The way he remembered small details about what she liked and disliked. The way he looked at her like she was someone worth protecting. But she was also realistic about their situation. He was a billionaire CEO. She was his pregnant employee. When her medical crisis was over, when the baby was born and she was back on her feet, what reason would he have to remain part of her life? Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed her mother's name. Hi, Mom. Hi, baby. How are you feeling? Good. Really good. Christopher stopped by earlier with groceries. He's been doing that every day this week, hasn't he? Yes. Nia could hear the knowing tone in her mother's voice. Mom, don't read anything into it. He's just being kind. Nia Washington, I raised you to be many things, but naive wasn't one of them. What's that supposed to mean? It means that man doesn't visit you every day out of charity. He doesn't send you beautiful dresses and fresh flowers because he's being polite to an employee. Nia looked at the small bouquet of bright yellow tulips on her kitchen counter, Christopher's surprise from this morning. Mom, even if that were true, which I'm not saying it is, this whole situation is temporary. Once I have the baby and recover, I'll go back to my regular life. Will you? Of course I will. Martha Washington was quiet for a moment. Baby, let me ask you something. When you think about your regular life, the one you had before all this happened, does it make you happy? Nia considered the question. Her old life. The cramped third-floor apartment, the constant worry about money, the loneliness of facing pregnancy alone, the knowledge that Jerome had abandoned her when things got difficult. It was my life, she said finally. That's not what I asked. Nia was quiet. Maybe, Martha said gently, it's time to consider that there might be something better waiting for you. Something that includes people who choose to stay when things get difficult instead of people who leave. After they hung up, Nia sat in the quiet apartment thinking about her mother's words. Outside, the city lights were beginning to twinkle as evening settled over downtown. Somewhere in the building above her, Christopher was probably working late as he seemed to do most nights. She wondered if he was thinking about their conversation too. She wondered if he had felt the same shift in the air between them when she told him he mattered to her. Most of all, she wondered if she was brave enough to find out what might happen if she let herself hope for something more than just temporary help from a kind employer. The baby kicked gently, as if reminding her that some chances are worth taking. 2 weeks had passed since Nia moved into the apartment, and their daily routine had evolved into something that felt remarkably natural. Christopher still stopped by every evening, but now he often stayed for dinner. They had begun cooking together, with Christopher proving surprisingly skilled at simple meals despite his claims of being hopeless in the kitchen. Tonight, Nia wore a bright green maternity dress that complemented her glowing skin. She was now at 5 months, her belly round and obvious, and she had never felt more beautiful. Part of that, she realized, was the way Christopher looked at her, as if her pregnancy made her more lovely rather than less. "How was your day?" Christopher asked, settling vegetables into the steamer while Nia seasoned chicken at the counter. "Productive, actually. I've been reading about childbirth classes and I found one that starts next month. It's designed for single mothers." Christopher was quiet for a moment. "Are you planning to go alone?" Yes, I assumed I would. What if you didn't have to?" Nia turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if someone went with you? As your support person?" "Christopher, you don't need to." "I want to," he said, meeting her eyes directly. "If you're comfortable with it, I'd like to be there." The offer hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to address directly. Attending childbirth classes together felt intimate in a way that went beyond employer helping employee. "You really want to learn about breathing techniques and labor positions?" Nia asked with a small smile. "I want to be helpful when the time comes. I want to know how to support you." "And after? After the baby comes and I'm recovered and everything is back to normal?" Christopher set down the knife he'd been using to chop onions. "Nia, can I be honest with you about something?" "Yes." "I don't think anything about this situation is going to go back to normal." "What do you mean?" Christopher was quiet for a long moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. "I mean that getting to know you over these past few weeks has changed things for me. The way I think about work, about what matters, about what I want from life." "Changed them how?" "Before, I worked late every night because I didn't have anything better to do. Now I find myself watching the clock, looking forward to coming here. To talking with you about your day, hearing about the baby's kicks, arguing with you about whether pineapple belongs on pizza." Nia felt her heart speed up. "Christopher, I know this is complicated," he continued. "I know you're in a vulnerable position and I'm in a position of power over you. I know you're dealing with a pregnancy and I'm not the baby's father. I know there are a dozen reasons why this doesn't make sense. But I also know that I care about you. Not just as someone who needs help, but as a person I enjoy spending time with. Someone whose opinion matters to me. Someone who makes me laugh and challenges me to think differently about things." Nia leaned against the kitchen counter, processing his words. "Are you saying you have feelings for me?" "I'm saying I'm developing feelings for you. Real feelings that go beyond wanting to help you through a difficult time." The kitchen was quiet except for the gentle sound of vegetables steaming. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. "I have feelings for you too," Nia said quietly. Christopher felt relief wash over him. "You do?" "Yes. But I'm scared." "Of what?" Nia looked down at her hands. "Of getting hurt again. Of believing that someone cares about me and then having them leave when things get real." Christopher moved closer to her, stopping just within arm's reach. "Nia, look at me." She lifted her eyes to meet his. "I'm here every day. I've been here through medical scares and emotional breakdowns and mundane conversations about what to have for dinner. What part of this isn't real?" "The part where you have choices," Nia said. "Right now, I need help so you feel good about providing it. But what happens when I don't need help anymore? When I'm just a single mother with a demanding job and a crying baby and all the complicated messiness of regular life?" Christopher reached out and gently took her hands in his. "Then I'll be here for the messiness too. If you'll let me." "You say that now." "I say that now and I'll say it tomorrow, and I'll say it 6 months from now when you're sleep-deprived and covered in baby food and wondering why you ever thought you could handle motherhood." Despite her fears, Nia found herself smiling. "You have no idea what you're signing up for." "Maybe not. But I'd like to find out." They stood there for a moment, hands linked, looking into each other's faces. The timer on the stove chimed, breaking the spell. "Dinner's ready," Nia said softly. "Right. Dinner." But neither of them moved immediately. The conversation had shifted something fundamental between them, acknowledged feelings that had been growing quietly for weeks. "Christopher," Nia said. "Yes. I'd like you to come to the childbirth classes with me." "Really? Really? But I have one condition." "What's that?" "No more walking on eggshells around each other. If we're going to do this, if we're going to see where these feelings lead, then we need to be honest about what we want." Christopher squeezed her hands gently. "What do you want, Nia?" "I want to stop being afraid of caring about you. I want to see if what we have is strong enough to build something real on. And I want to be the person you can count on, whether that's for medical emergencies or midnight ice cream runs or just someone to talk to after a difficult day." "Midnight ice cream runs?" Christopher grinned. "I hear pregnant women have cravings at inconvenient hours." "Where did you hear that?" "I may have been reading some books about pregnancy and childbirth." Nia stared at him. "You've been reading pregnancy books? How else am I supposed to know what you're going through?" The simple thoughtfulness of it brought tears to Nia's eyes. "You really care about this? About me? About the baby?" "I really do." This time, when Nia felt tears coming, they were tears of joy rather than fear. For the first time since Jerome had walked out, she felt like she might not have to face the future alone. "So," Christopher said, finally letting go of her hands to check on their dinner, "tell me more about these childbirth classes." As they ate dinner together, talking about breathing techniques and hospital bags and all the practical preparations for the baby's arrival, both of them felt something settling into place. This wasn't just temporary help anymore. This was the beginning of something that neither of them fully understood yet, but both were willing to explore. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and inside the small apartment, two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way began to imagine what their future might look like together. Christopher's phone rang at 7:30 Saturday morning, waking him from a deep sleep in his penthouse apartment. The caller ID showed his father's name, which was unusual. Robert Bennett Sr. rarely called on weekends unless something was wrong. "Good morning, Dad." "Christopher, we need to talk. I'll be at your office in an hour." The line went dead before Christopher could respond. He sat up in bed, running a hand through his hair. His father's tone had been clipped, formal, and distinctly unhappy about something. An hour later, Christopher sat across from his father in his downtown office, wondering what could have prompted this early morning meeting. "I hear you've been playing house with one of your employees," Robert said without preamble. Christopher felt his jaw tighten. "I've been helping someone who needed help." "A pregnant someone?" "Yes." "Someone whose baby isn't yours?" "That's correct." Robert leaned back in his leather chair, studying his son's face. "Christopher, I didn't build this company so you could throw it away on some misguided charity case." "Careful, Dad," Christopher said quietly. "You're talking about someone I care about." "That's exactly the problem." Robert stood up and began pacing behind the desk. "Do you have any idea how this looks?" The CEO of Bennett Industries, one of the most successful companies in the state, shacking up with a pregnant secretary. "She works in accounting, not as a secretary. And we're not shacking up. She's living in your building. You're paying her bills. You're seen with her in public. How exactly is that different?" Christopher stood up as well, facing his father across the desk. "The difference is that I care about her well-being and the well-being of her baby. The difference is that I'm helping someone who deserves help. And when this all goes wrong, when she decides to sue you for more money or when the press gets hold of this story, what then? It won't go wrong. How can you be so naive?" Robert's voice was rising. "You barely know this woman. She got herself pregnant by some man who abandoned her, and now she's latched onto you because you have money. Can't you see what's happening here?" Christopher felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "What I see is a hard-working woman who found herself in a difficult situation through no fault of her own. What I see is someone with integrity and strength who's trying to do the right thing for her child. You see what she wants you to see." "No, Dad. I see what's really there because I've taken the time to get to know her." Robert stopped pacing and fixed his son with a hard stare. "I want her gone, Christopher. Whatever arrangement you have with this woman ends now. That's not your decision to make. It is if you want to remain CEO of this company." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Christopher stared at his father, seeing the same man who had taught him about business, about responsibility, about building something that would last. But he was also seeing someone who valued reputation over compassion, appearances over genuine human connection. "You're threatening my job because I'm helping someone? I'm protecting our family's reputation and our company's future. This woman is a liability, Christopher. She's a distraction that's already affecting your judgment." How is she affecting my judgment? When was the last time you worked a full day without running off to check on her? When was the last time you attended a business dinner or a networking event? You've become so focused on playing savior that you're neglecting your actual responsibilities. Christopher was quiet for a moment, considering his father's words. It was true that his priorities had shifted. He had been leaving work earlier, declining some social obligations, rearranging his schedule around Nia's needs. But for the first time in his adult life, he felt like he was living rather than just existing. You're right, he said finally. My priorities have changed. I consider that a good thing. Christopher. I'm 35 years old, Dad. I've spent 15 years building this company into something successful. I've made us more money than we could spend in 3 lifetimes. I think I've earned the right to care about someone. This isn't about caring. This is about making smart choices. And I think choosing to be with someone who makes me a better person is the smartest choice I've ever made. Robert was quiet for several minutes, clearly struggling with his son's stubborn refusal to see reason from his perspective. I won't support this, he said finally. I'm not asking you to. Your mother won't either. She's already talking about how embarrassing this will be at the country club. Christopher almost smiled at that. His mother's primary concern about any situation was always how it would appear to her social circle. Then I guess you and Mom will have something to talk about. Christopher, you're throwing away everything we've worked for. No, Dad. I'm finally working towards something that actually matters to me. Robert Bennett Sr. had built his success by being practical, strategic, and emotionally detached from business decisions. Watching his son make what he considered a catastrophic personal choice based on feelings rather than logic was almost more than he could bear. Fine, he said, moving toward the door. But when this all falls apart, don't come crying to me about how you should have listened. After his father left, Christopher sat alone in his office for a long time, staring out the window toward the building where Nia was probably starting her day. He had known that his family would disapprove once they learned about the relationship. He had hoped they might be more understanding. But he had also known, even before his father's ultimatum, that he would choose Nia. His phone buzzed with a text message. Good morning. How was your early meeting? Hope your dad isn't too upset about whatever brought him out on a Saturday. Christopher smiled despite everything. Nia had noticed his father's car in the parking garage and had correctly guessed the reason for the visit. He typed back, could be better. Can I come down? I have some things to tell you. Of course. I'm making pancakes. As Christopher rode the elevator down to Nia's floor, he realized that his father had been wrong about one thing. This wasn't going to fall apart. But it was definitely going to be complicated. When Nia opened the door, wearing a bright blue dress and a concerned expression, Christopher felt the same certainty that had been growing in him for weeks. Whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together. So, Nia said, leading him to the kitchen where pancakes were indeed cooking on the stove, how bad was it? Pretty bad, Christopher admitted. But not bad enough to change anything. What do you mean? Christopher sat down at the small table and looked at the woman who had somehow become the center of his world in just a few weeks. I mean that I'd rather have a complicated life with you than a simple life without you. Nia felt her heart skip a beat. Even if it means problems with your family? Even if it means problems with my family? And if they don't come around? If they never accept me? Christopher reached across the table and took her hand. Then that will be their loss. But it won't change how I feel about you. As they sat together in the sunny kitchen, eating pancakes and talking about the challenges that lay ahead, both of them knew that their relationship had just been tested for the first time. And both of them knew that it had passed. 3 days after Christopher's confrontation with his father, Nia received an unexpected visitor. She was folding baby clothes, a new batch of tiny outfits that Christopher had surprised her with, when someone knocked on her door. Through the peephole, she saw a tall Hispanic man with familiar dark eyes and an uncertain expression. Jerome. Nia's heart started racing as she opened the door, leaving the chain lock engaged. What are you doing here, Jerome? Nia, please. Can we talk? I don't think that's a good idea. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for. Against her better judgment, Nia unhooked the chain and opened the door. Jerome stepped inside, looking around the apartment with obvious surprise. Nice place, he said. New job paying better? What do you want, Jerome? He was quiet for a moment, taking in her appearance. She was 6 months pregnant now, glowing with health, wearing a beautiful maroon maternity dress. She looked better than he had ever seen her. I heard about your hospital scare, he said. I wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm fine. The baby's fine. Good. That's good. Jerome sat down uninvited on the couch. Nia, I've been thinking a lot about us. About what happened. There is no us, Jerome. You made that very clear when you moved out. I made a mistake. The words Nia had longed to hear 6 months ago now left her feeling nothing but tired. Did you? Yes. I was scared, okay? The whole thing happened so fast and I wasn't ready to be a father. But I've had time to think and I realize I want to be part of this. Part of what? The baby's life. Your life. I want us to try again. Nia sat down in the chair across from him, maintaining distance between them. Where is this coming from, Jerome? 6 months ago you said you were too young for this responsibility. What's changed? Jerome looked uncomfortable. I've grown up. I've realized what's important. Have you? Or did you hear something else that made you suddenly interested in being involved? What do you mean? Nia studied his face, seeing the same evasive expression she remembered from whenever he was hiding something. Did someone tell you about Christopher? Jerome's expression shifted, becoming defensive. I heard you were living with some rich guy. People are talking, Nia. What people? Does it matter? The point is, I heard you found yourself a sugar daddy, and I thought you should know that I'm ready to step up now. Be the father this baby deserves. The casual cruelty of his words hit Nia like a slap. You think I'm with Christopher for his money? Aren't you? Come on, Nia. You're living in a fancy apartment, wearing expensive clothes. A guy like that doesn't take care of a pregnant woman out of the goodness of his heart. Get out. Nia, listen. Get out of my apartment. Now. I'm the baby's father, Jerome said, standing up. I have rights. You gave up your rights when you walked out on us. I can get a lawyer. I can fight for custody. Nia felt a chill run down her spine, but she kept her voice steady. You can try. But I have documentation of you abandoning us, and a lawyer who will be very interested to hear about this conversation. Jerome stared at her for a moment, clearly surprised by her strength. The Nia he remembered would have been crying by now, would have been willing to negotiate, to try to make things work for the baby's sake. You've changed, he said. Yes, I have. I've learned what it feels like to be with someone who doesn't run away when things get difficult. This won't last, you know. Guys like him don't end up with girls like you. I think you should leave before I call security. After Jerome left, Nia sat in the quiet apartment, shaking slightly from the encounter. She was still sitting there 20 minutes later when Christopher arrived for his usual evening visit. Hey, he said, then stopped when he saw her expression. What's wrong? Jerome was here. Christopher's entire demeanor changed. What did he want? To tell me he's ready to be a father now. To tell me that you're just using me and this won't last. Nia looked up at him. To threaten to fight for custody of the baby. Christopher sat down beside her on the couch. Are you okay? I think so. But Christopher, what if he's serious about the custody thing? Then we'll deal with it. But Nia, you know he can't just show up after 6 months and demand parental rights, especially if he's been absent during the entire pregnancy. He seemed pretty confident that a court would side with him as the biological father. Christopher was quiet for a moment, thinking. Would you like me to have my lawyer look into this? Nia nodded. Yes, please. Good. We'll get ahead of this. Christopher paused, then asked gently, how did it feel seeing him again? Nia considered the question. Disappointing. And clarifying. Clarifying how? I realized that 6 months ago if he had come back and said he wanted to try again, I probably would have said yes. Not because I loved him, but because I was scared of being alone. And now? Now I know the difference between someone who's with you because they want to be and someone who's with you because they think they should be. She looked directly at Christopher. And I know the difference between someone who shows up when it's convenient and someone who shows up when you need them. Christopher reached for her hand. Nia, I need to tell you something. Okay. After seeing Jerome today, after hearing him threaten you and the baby, I'm even more certain about how I feel about you. About us. How do you feel about us? I love you, Christopher said simply. I love you and I want to be part of your life and your daughter's life, not just for now but permanently. Nia felt tears spring to her eyes. Christopher. I know it's complicated. I know there are legal issues to work out with Jerome, and family issues with my parents, and practical questions about how we make this work long term. But I also know that I want to figure it out with you. I love you too, Nia said softly. I was afraid to say it before, afraid it was too soon or too complicated, but I do. I love you. Christopher leaned over and kissed her gently, a kiss that tasted like promises and hope and the future they were both brave enough to want. So what do we do now? Nia asked when they broke apart. Now we call my lawyer about Jerome. We figure out the legal protections you need. And then we start planning for the future we want instead of just reacting to the problems other people create. What kind of future do you want? Christopher smiled. One where I get to come home to you and your daughter every day. One where we build something together that's stronger than whatever challenges come our way. Even if your family never accepts me, my family will come around eventually. But even if they don't, you and the baby are my family now too. As they sat together on the couch, talking about lawyers and custody battles and family dynamics, Nia realized that Jerome's visit had actually been a gift in disguise. It had forced her to recognize how much she had grown, how much she had healed, and how much she truly cared for the man sitting beside her. The tension is building. Will true love win? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for the emotional conclusion. For the first time since learning she was pregnant, Nia felt completely confident about the choices she was making. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was no longer facing them alone. 2 weeks later, Christopher's lawyer delivered news that would change everything. Michael Torres sat across from them in his downtown office, a thick file folder open on the desk between them. I've done some investigating into Jerome Martinez, he said, and what I found is very interesting. Nia, now 7 months pregnant and wearing a bright blue dress, leaned forward in her chair. Christopher reached over and took her hand. What did you find? Christopher asked. First, the good news. Jerome has no legal standing to demand custody or visitation rights at this point. He voluntarily abandoned his parental responsibilities, there's documentation of that abandonment, and he's made no financial contributions to the pregnancy or medical care. Nia felt relief wash over her. So he can't take the baby? Not without a very expensive legal battle that he's unlikely to win, especially given what else I discovered. What else? Christopher asked. Michael opened the file folder and pulled out several documents. Jerome Martinez has been asking questions about Christopher for the past month. Specifically, questions about his net worth, his business holdings, and his family's wealth. He's been investigating Christopher? Nia felt a chill run down her spine. More than that. He's been in contact with a tabloid reporter, trying to sell them a story about Christopher's relationship with you. Christopher felt anger building in his chest. What kind of story? The headline was going to be something like, Billionaire CEO takes advantage of desperate pregnant employee. Jerome was going to claim that you coerced Nia into a relationship in exchange for financial support. Nia stared at the lawyer in shock. He was going to lie about us to the press? It gets worse, Michael continued. Jerome's sudden interest in being a father coincides exactly with his discovery that Christopher is worth several $100 million. He wasn't coming back for you or the baby, Nia. He was coming back for a potential payday. The room was quiet for several minutes as they processed this information. Can we stop him? Christopher asked. Actually, he's already been stopped. When the tabloid editor called to verify the story, I was able to provide them with documentation showing Jerome's abandonment of his parental responsibilities, his complete absence during the pregnancy, and evidence of his mercenary motives. No reputable publication will touch this story now. What about Jerome himself? He received a cease and desist letter yesterday. If he continues to harass you or makes any more attempts to sell false stories about your relationship, he'll face legal consequences. Nia felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that the threat was over, sadness that the father of her child had turned out to be even worse than she had imagined. I'm sorry, Nia, Christopher said gently. I know this must be painful to hear. Actually, Nia said slowly, it's not painful. It's clarifying. Again. What do you mean? I mean that now I know for certain that Jerome never loved me or wanted our baby. He saw an opportunity to make money and that's all. She looked at Christopher. It makes me appreciate even more what real love looks like. Michael cleared his throat. There's one more thing we need to discuss. Christopher, your father contacted my office yesterday. Christopher tensed. What did he want? He wanted me to draw up a prenuptial agreement. A what? Nia looked confused. He's assuming you two are planning to get married, Michael explained. He wants to protect the family assets. Christopher felt his anger flare again. I didn't ask him to do that. Actually, Michael continued, I think his timing is interesting. Because I was going to suggest that you two should think about making your relationship official before the baby arrives. What do you mean? Nia asked. I mean that if you're married, Christopher would have legal standing as the baby's stepfather immediately. It would provide additional protection against any future claims from Jerome, and it would establish Christopher's parental rights from birth. Christopher and Nia looked at each other, both recognizing the practical wisdom of the suggestion. But, Michael continued, if you do decide to marry, you should know that Christopher's father is going to push hard for a prenup that would leave you with almost nothing if the marriage doesn't work out. That's not happening, Christopher said immediately. The prenup or the marriage? Nia asked quietly. The prenup. If we get married as equals. No contracts that assume failure. Nia was quiet for several minutes, thinking. Christopher, maybe your father has a point. What? I mean, from his perspective, I can see why he'd be concerned. We haven't been together very long, I am pregnant with another man's child, and you are wealthy enough that people might question my motives. I don't question your motives. I know you don't. But maybe a prenup would actually protect both of us. It would prove that I'm not with you for your money, and it would give your family one less thing to worry about. Christopher stared at her. You would sign a prenup? If it meant that your family would give us a chance, yes. Michael leaned back in his chair, clearly impressed. That's actually very smart. It would remove the financial element from everyone's concerns about your relationship. But I don't want you to have to prove anything to anyone, Christopher protested. I'm not doing it to prove anything, Nia said. I'm doing it because I love you and I want your family to see that I love you for who you are, not what you have. Christopher was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Nia's offer. The fact that she was willing to sign a prenup actually proved to him more than anything else that her feelings for him were genuine. Okay, he said finally. If that's what you want to do, then we'll do it. Really? Really? But Nia, I want you to know that I'm not asking you to marry me just for legal protection. Why are you asking me to marry you? Christopher turned in his chair to face her fully. I'm asking you to marry me because I love you. Because I want to build a life with you and raise your daughter as our daughter. Because I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night for the rest of our lives. Tears started flowing down Nia's cheeks. Are you proposing to me in a lawyer's office? I'm proposing to you wherever you'll say yes. Yes, Nia said through her tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Michael Torres had witnessed many emotional moments in his law practice, but watching a billionaire CEO propose to his pregnant employee in the middle of a discussion about custody battles and prenuptial agreements was definitely a first. Congratulations, he said with a smile. Now, shall we discuss the timeline for making all of this legal before the baby arrives? As they spent the next hour working out the practical details of their engagement, both Christopher and Nia felt a sense of everything falling into place. They had faced the truth about Jerome's motives, addressed the concerns about Christopher's family, and committed to a future together based on love rather than convenience or necessity. The baby kicked energetically as if celebrating the decision, and for the first time since this whole journey began, Nia felt completely at peace with the path her life was taking. 2 months later, on a bright October morning, Nia woke up at 4 a.m. with contractions that were impossible to ignore. She was 2 days past her due date, and Dr. Johnson had warned her that the baby could arrive at any time. Christopher, she said softly, shaking his shoulder. They had been married for 6 weeks in a simple ceremony at the courthouse, with Martha Washington and Michael Torres as witnesses. Christopher had moved into the apartment with her, preferring the cozy space to his sterile penthouse. What's wrong? Christopher was instantly awake, alert. I think it's time. Christopher sat up immediately, switching into the calm, focused mode they had practiced in childbirth class. How far apart are the contractions? About 5 minutes. Okay. Let's get you to the hospital. The ride to St. Mary's Hospital felt both endless and too fast. Nia was wearing the comfortable green dress Christopher had bought her specifically for the hospital trip, and she gripped his hand tightly as each contraction passed. You're doing great, Christopher murmured, stroking her hair as they sat in the back seat of the car he had called. Just breathe through it. At the hospital, Dr. Johnson was waiting for them. Let's see how we're progressing, she said with a warm smile after they got Nia settled in the labor and delivery room. The next 8 hours passed in a blur of contractions, breathing exercises, and Christopher being exactly the support person Nia needed. He held her hand, brought her ice chips, and reminded her of the breathing techniques they had learned in class. I can't do this, Nia gasped during a particularly intense contraction. Yes, you can, Christopher said firmly. You're the strongest person I know. You can do anything. But at hour 9 something changed. Dr. Johnson's expression became serious as she checked the fetal monitor. What's wrong? Christopher asked immediately. The baby's heart rate is dropping. We need to do an emergency C-section. Nia felt panic rising in her chest. Is she okay? We're going to make sure she's okay, Dr. Johnson said, already moving to prepare for surgery. Christopher, as Nia's husband and the baby's legal father, I need you to make some quick decisions about her care. The words hit both of them simultaneously. Legal father. The marriage and adoption papers had gone through just 2 weeks earlier. Legally, Christopher was this baby's father in every way that mattered. What do you need to know? Christopher asked, his hand never leaving Nia's. If we run into complications, who do we prioritize? Mother or baby? It was the question Christopher had hoped never to face. He looked at Nia, seeing the fear in her eyes mixed with trust that he would make the right choice. Save them both, he said. Christopher, Dr. Johnson said gently, I need a clear directive. Christopher looked at Nia again, then back at the doctor. Save Nia. If you can only save one of them, save Nia. Christopher, no, Nia started to protest. Yes, he said firmly. I love you both, but I can't live without you. 20 minutes later, in the operating room, Dr. Johnson worked quickly while Christopher held Nia's hand and whispered words of encouragement in her ear. The surgery felt like it lasted forever and like it was over in an instant. Then, suddenly, there was crying. She's here, Dr. Johnson announced, holding up a small, red-faced baby girl with a powerful set of lungs. Is she okay? Nia asked weakly. She's perfect, Dr. Johnson said with a huge smile. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and clearly very angry about being evicted. Christopher found himself crying as he looked at the tiny person who was now officially his daughter. She had Nia's dark eyes and a head full of curly hair, and she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Do you want to hold her? The nurse asked Christopher. With shaking hands, he took his daughter for the first time. She stopped crying immediately and looked up at him with curious, dark eyes. Hi there, he whispered. I'm your daddy. Nia, still recovering from the surgery but fully awake, watched Christopher hold their daughter with tears streaming down her face. The sight of this man she loved cradling the baby they would raise together was more beautiful than anything she had ever imagined. What's her name? The nurse asked, preparing to fill out the birth certificate. Christopher and Nia had discussed names for weeks, but looking at their daughter now, they both knew there was only one choice. Hope, Nia said softly. Her name is Hope. Hope Bennett, Christopher added, and the name felt perfect. 3 days later, they brought Hope home to the apartment that was now officially their first family home. Christopher had taken 2 weeks off from work, despite his father's protests, to help Nia recover and to bond with their daughter. I can't believe she's ours, Nia said, sitting in the comfortable chair by the window, nursing Hope while Christopher sat nearby, watching them both with an expression of complete contentment. I can't believe how much I love her already, Christopher said. Is it normal to feel like your heart might explode from happiness? If it's not normal, then we're both abnormal, Nia said with a laugh. That evening, as they settled Hope into her crib for the night, Christopher put his arms around Nia and looked at the family they had created. Do you remember when you accidentally texted me that night at the hospital? He asked. The worst mistake I ever made that turned out to be the best mistake I ever made? Exactly. Do you think you would have ever talked to me otherwise? Really talked to me, not just polite workplace conversation? Nia considered the question. Probably not. I thought you were too important to notice someone like me. And I thought I was too busy building a business empire to notice that I was missing out on everything that actually mattered. And now? Christopher looked at their sleeping daughter, then at the woman who had become his whole world. Now I know that the most important things in life aren't things you build. They're things you find when you're brave enough to let someone else matter more than your plans. 6 months later, Christopher's parents finally came to visit. Martha Washington was there too, and the apartment was filled with the sounds of 3 grandparents competing for baby Hope's attention. Robert Bennett Sr. sat in the living room, holding his granddaughter while she gurgled happily at him. She's beautiful, he said to Nia, and she could hear genuine warmth in his voice for the first time. She is, isn't she? Nia, Robert said quietly while the others were in the kitchen preparing dinner, I owe you an apology. You don't? I do. I was wrong about you. About your motives, about what you meant to Christopher. I can see now that you make my son happy in a way I've never seen before. Thank you, Nia said simply. And I can see that you love this baby the way every child deserves to be loved. We both do. Robert nodded. Christopher told me about the prenup situation. About your willingness to sign one to prove your intentions. Yes. We're tearing it up. Your family now. All of it, the business, the money, all of it belongs to all of us. Nia felt tears spring to her eyes. Robert, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because that's what families do. They share everything, including trust. That night, after everyone had gone home and Hope was sleeping peacefully in her crib, Christopher and Nia sat together on their couch, talking about the day. I never imagined my life could be this good, Nia said, curled up against Christopher's side. Even with all the complications? The drama with Jerome, the issues with my family, the emergency surgery? Especially with all the complications, Nia said. Because every challenge we faced together. And every time we chose each other. Christopher kissed the top of her head. I love our life. Even though it's not what you planned, it's better than what I planned. It's everything I didn't know I wanted. As they sat together in their small apartment, listening to their daughter's soft breathing from the next room, both Nia and Christopher reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A mistaken text message had led to a hospital emergency, which had led to an offer of help, which had led to friendship, which had led to love, which had led to marriage and family and a happiness neither had imagined possible. Do you think Hope will ask about her biological father someday? Nia asked. Probably. And when she does, we'll tell her the truth. That Jerome helped create her, but that he chose not to be part of her life. And that sometimes the people who choose to love us matter more than the people who are obligated to love us. And we'll tell her that families are made of love, not just biology. Exactly. Hope stirred in her sleep, making the soft sounds that meant she would wake up soon for her late-night feeding. Christopher got up to check on her, and Nia watched him lean over the crib, adjusting the tiny blanket and whispering words of love to their daughter. This was their life now. Midnight feedings and early morning giggles and the extraordinary joy of watching someone you love discover the world for the first time. It was messier and more complicated and more wonderful than anything either of them had ever planned. And as Nia joined Christopher by the crib, watching Hope sleep with the absolute peace that comes from knowing you are completely loved, she realized that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments. Sometimes a desperate text message sent to the wrong number can change everything. Sometimes accepting help from an unexpected source can lead to love. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to let kindness and hope lead the way, you find that the family you build is even stronger than the family you're born into. Hope opened her eyes and looked up at her parents, and in that moment, all three of them knew that their story was just beginning.